Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you happenstance into this truth bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell, and this is my 563rd truth bomb over the course of about now getting closer to 3 years. And to those of you who have been following me the whole time, thank you so much. Welcome to the new folks that may have discovered me through my recent interview with Mark Thompson, and I'll soon to be on several larger podcasts getting this message out there. But you know the drill on YouTube, and I really very rarely suggest this, but please hit the like and subscribe button. Be on the lookout for notifications, that sort of thing, when these truth bombs drop. And I would love to have you on board moving forward, because what I'm attempting to do is to put together really all of the answers that the entire system of our government and our media have befuddled the American people and, quite frankly, the world with all sorts of tricks of deception and obfuscation and cherry picking and a garden variety of just, quite frankly, straight up betrayal that has confused the vast majority of the United States as well as the world, in so much that we can't see the forest for the trees, the proverbial forest through the trees. And those of you who have seen me or follow me on X, many of you have responded recently. I showcased this really great meme of something that I've been saying for some time, which is Donald Trump is, quite frankly, the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid. And there's this great meme that someone built that is this, just incredibly obese Donald Trump walking through, the town square with all of the other people, and he's naked and he's just obese and disgusting and all of that other thing. And, just basically a representation of the children's fable of the emperor's new clothes. And my friends, that's what we're in the midst of. But as I continue to tell you through these truth bombs, which are, for those of you who are new, part therapy, part sermon, part lecture, but in the end, it's reacting to really everything that's going on to piecemeal together everything that I've learned throughout this journey, which are the answers that nobody can see. And in so much, I've declared myself, and this is more from a kind of like a strategic sort of thinking, but in terms of trying to position myself in this incredibly overwhelming sea of lies and distortions and misinformation and outright lies, to foment this sort of concept that I'm the producer, which is what I am. That's what I do. That's my world. That's how I make money. That's how I survive. So I'm a producer. And then I asked the question, well, what is the con? Well, the con is my prolific work that it took me years and years and millions of dollars and thousands of hours to do the work that the United States didn't do. And there's a reason for that. And we made it available for free because all the American people buy our lives. And you can find that at www.thecon.tv. And by the way, Mark Thompson taught me the other day, I don't need to say www. So that's just habit. So I apologize. Just thecon.tv, thecon.tv, thecon.tv. Saying it 3 times enables me to hopefully think forward on my next proclamation in terms of where you can find the answers to all of that, the questions and what will reveal. Because when you understand the con, which is what the federal government, the $90 billion a year apparatus of our Department of Justice, our FBI, of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and AGs around the country, that they couldn't put forward on behalf of the American people because of, unfortunately, what we now all see absolutely clearly. Again, why Donald Trump is the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid, which is corruption. And like I told Mark Thompson the other day, and I'm going to tell everybody else that I have the opportunity to tell, that it's just simply corruption. But to understand the notion of corruption, you have to literally understand who did what, when, and how, what they're guilty of. You have to have the discovery based on investigation, based on the understanding of how things are supposed to work, to understand how they do work in a way that they're not supposed to. Everything is just antithetical, perverse, inside out. Like a priest who's supposed to give the mission of God to the flock, only to find out later that he's raping the most vulnerable in the flock. That's called predation. And yeah, it's not just limited to whatever religious connotation that many have the same problem and has forever, probably for the entirety of mankind. So I find myself right now just kind of stumbling along this, and I'm not thinking as clearly as I want to, but I want to deliver this once and get on to my other things. Usually, I introduce these as like, I timestamp it, I tell you the date and time, and I'm just recording this on a Saturday. It doesn't matter because this is going to be the same story, the same truth, no matter when you hear it from now until time eternal, whether or not we turn the tables on everything that's going on or that what is going on destroys the world. And that's really what we're at the devil's crossroads, my friends. So to kind of reiterate what I've already introduced, I'm the producer. I'm the guy that put together the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history that never ended, which you can find in our work, which is the blueprint, thecon.tv. And I got it right on that time, which then leads you to understand, or I should hope, how do I want to calibrate this? I dropped the breadcrumbs to basically get you on the right path on this yellow brick road adventure odyssey that's taken me years and years and millions of dollars to figure out. That leads us to what is Federal Reserve Act 13.3. And I've done a white paper that is available for all the world to see that presents all of the evidence that is in our broader platform that this is all in service to. Because to be able to fix a problem, excuse me, to find a solution to a problem, you have to understand the problem first. That's just the way it works. It works in every paradigm. It works in every system. If you want something to work efficiently, correctly, you have to understand what the problems are. And especially if there's corruption and grift, which of course, the notion of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is the exact opposite of what it proclaims to be because of the nature of Trump's formula as the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid. What Trump has been involved with really for decades, and what he does time and time again, and he does it right in front of our face, and it's unbelievable what's happening in context to the emperor's new clothes. He lies. His whole thing is to lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. And so he always has everybody on their heels while he does all sorts of things in a proactive way with those that are in on his con. And ultimately, you find out through my work that Donald Trump is just a small to mid-level player. Obviously, he's got a much bigger role now that he's president once again, which should be shocking to everybody. But the bottom line is he's there for better or for worse, even though I do know, and I'm convinced, well, we do know, God, there's just so much information to go through, and I don't want to do it all, but I kind of find myself having to do it. He stole the election, okay? We know that they suppressed at least 3.5 million votes. How do I know that? Greg Palast. I'll put, a link to his work down below that proved through the audit that there was at least 3.5 million votes suppressed throughout the swing states. And then there was anomalies where just things that are impossible happened that nobody stopped. And then, of course, Trump won. And of course, we know that Trump and MAGA had orchestrated the insurrection that the Supreme Court said wasn't an insurrection, that the Supreme Court turned on its face the 14th Amendment, Section 3, that said in black and white that the people that were involved with that amendment to the Constitution had just fought a civil war where the victors go the spoils and they get to write the laws. And the laws that they wrote said that anybody involved with an insurrection cannot run for the office, for office, period, let alone the chief executive office. And it's important to think of the presidency as the chief executive office because of what? All things Project 2025 and the unitary presidency, which is a CEO. And if you understand anything about all of the formulations and the foundations of what the Heritage think tank did to formulate Project 2025 is to understand the unitary presidency is a CEO, which Alan Greenspan, who was the former president of the Federal or chairman of the Federal Reserve, said, yeah, we want dictators as CEOs. Which when you fully understand that composite, you understand why I say that we're not a democracy. We're not a representative republic either. And I'll go into that momentarily, but we're not a democracy. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to guarantee the mafiocracy that is now fueling fascism, which means it's a version of socialism. Surprise. but for the rich criminals that have complete control. Now, when I used to say these types of things, and now I'm going on a roll because I'm just like getting into my Rolodex, into my file cabinet of my brain, as I'm just trying to off the cuff, and an abbreviated version, try to give you this information to justify what we're doing moving forward and why you have to wrap your head around what it is that I'm telling you. If you want to save the United States the way it was designed, the way that we've lived in most of our life before it's completely gutted, and it has been gutted. We're not a democracy right now. Do you not know that? Do you not know that the law is no longer for the powerful? Who are the powerful? Well, the people who have the most money. How do they have the most money? Did they find did they build a gizmo better? They delivered a market and sold more than everybody else compositely, so therefore they won in the marketplace. So therefore capitalism, risk reward, and they deserve that position. No, that's not what's going on. Elon Musk didn't sell more Teslas to get billions and billions and billions of more in his net worth based on what I'm revealing to you. Trump is the end of the road. Okay? Trump is the last 30 years and a nanosecond. Okay? It's what I've been trying to explain to you is how the system of power is working and is a complete perversion, like the priest who rapes the flock instead of delivers the message of God, which would make him a demon from fucking hell, would it not? For those who actually have any principles or characters or know right from wrong. If you think it's okay to rape children in your congregation, turn this off, get the fuck lost. I'm not talking to you. Now, for all you maggots out there who proclamate like Elon Musk that, oh yeah, all of the child molesters, those who rape children, need to given the death penalty. You're a liar. You're a liar. I don't know what the hell the psychology is, but I saw in real time when Elon Musk was able to complete the purchase of X, and it wasn't Elon Musk paying $43 or whatever the purchase price was to Jack Dorsey. He had a consortium of billionaire apparatuses, including too big to fail banks, private equity. He had hedge fund guys involved. He had the Saudi sovereign wealth involved, as well as whatever billions he brought to the table. But immediately, the first thing that they did was everywhere, and I saw this everywhere, there was just like this huge groundswell, this tidal wave of tweets in whatever we call it now, that it's X, that were proclamating, oh my God, we've got to somehow arrest, destroy, defeat this international cabal of sex trafficking. Meanwhile, we all saw the pictures of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump got his wife, Melania, from Epstein, if you didn't know that. And Donald Trump was flying around on Epstein's plane, the Lolita Express, during the campaign. Are you kidding me? That's the stupidity of MAGA. It's just, again, lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. But all of this is nonsensical child's play. This is the kind of techniques of children in elementary school, let alone junior high school, and it gets more sophisticated and worse in high school. But all of this is a manifestation when A, the adults are no longer in control because the law has no functionality or actually any consequence. That's what I'm trying to inform you. But it's not new. This is the end of the road. Look, a couple of things have popped up on my radar that I'm in the centerpiece of, okay? Again, I got to just say this to those of you who are paying attention. I've got a very limited audience, but the people who are paying attention to me, in addition to all of you out there, are literally Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, all the shadow power that constitutes our financial system, most notably BlackRock, and I guarantee you, Putin. Okay, I've got a philosophy on Putin, or a theory, I should say, not a philosophy, a theory on what we are in context of what Putin has been playing the long game since, quite frankly, Russia went bankrupt because of long-term capital management's derivatives play in the late 90s, which bankrupted the Soviet Union. But it's interesting. I left off right before that. I went from who is Patrick Lovell? What is the Clean New Deal? I introduced what is Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which is what nobody knows. Not Rachel Maddow, not the New York Times, not anyone. Although I have my doubts on that. I think they all do, but I think that's what they chose not to cover. And that's why we're in this situation. Ideologically, in terms of kind of how I think, look, I'm on the same sort of side as Rachel Maddow, for example, just in terms of the long haul, where we come from, our kind of our education, our worldview, what we think about America, and that sort of thing. But I recognized a long time ago that Rachel Maddow is the director of communications for the Wall Street meritocracy revolving door. And that's why she gets paid $42 million a year or whatever she's getting paid now after the breakup at MSNBC after the Trump election because of everything that's going on. And, she did not tell you this, which is why I had to. Yeah, Rachel Maddow is, to a degree, a different version of Trump. They both lie. But for what outcome? Rachel Maddow works for the Wall Street meritocracy revolving door Democratic Party, DNC, that is tethered to what? The billionaire oligarchy. Donald Trump was kind of, I don't know, maybe at times a billionaire, but not really. But most of it was made by fraud. And fraud isn't shenanigans like what Hillary Clinton said. Fraud is illegal theft by deception that is a felony. And it has different degrees of felonies. And the most robust version is racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. That's the statute to take down organized crime. That's what this is. And so when you think about the hierarchy, quite frankly, I don't know why this just popped in my head, but I'm going to use this as kind of a corollary. When you look at the dollar bill and you think about the mythical representation of the all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid. So if you go up the pyramid, it's 13 steps, okay, to the all-seeing eye. And the all-seeing eye is the eye of providence, the eye of providence that the founders would conjecture were on the side of liberty and justice for all, on truth and justice. I buy that. I'm not into any other sort of manifestation that because they were white gentry owner class that they really wanted to create a new subjugation and slavery, even though that's what we did, because that was the outcome. Look, it was a time period. There were a bunch of learned men, and obviously they all had to came from landowning gentry to become learned at that time, to be able to challenge the monopoly of King George III. And of course, what I always point out is it wasn't just King George III. It was the pyramid of King George III, Parliament, the legislative branch, and then the corporate branch would be the East India Trading Company. And then, of course, the military arm, which is the Redcoats and the Royal Navy, which is the largest military of its time, right? And so that's ultimately what we rebelled against to create separation of powers and the Constitution that would manifest the Bill of Rights, that would create separation of powers so that no man or company was above the law. And what we all know is that's all horseshit. Why? Because learned men that know how the game is played can be corrupted because absolute power creates absolute corruption. This is the story of humanity that we're in the midst of because as we all know, because of this giant shit sandwich by Elon Musk and Donald Trump that they're waterboarding you with to see how much you can take is that there is no law. There is no accountability. There is no separation of powers, which is why we created the Clean New Deal. Why did we create the Clean New Deal? This was far in advance of President Biden, who I'll call Neville Chamberlain Biden, departure speech from the White House after he did the Neville Chamberlain handshake with insurrectionist Trump in the Oval Office, which is insane. After 6 months after the Supreme Court said the office of the presidency was above the law and Biden didn't have the Constitution to wage war on the corruption in the Supreme Court, let alone everything Elon Musk was transparently doing a year before the election. And Rachel Maddow and everybody else from MSNBC and everywhere else were ignoring Elon until it was too late. Now this is all they can talk about. Why is it possible that a billionaire, foreign born for that matter, the richest man in the world, could usurp the Constitution, our democracy, our separation of powers, and our law to be able to illegally hijack our government. And then to emulate, and this is another thing I've been saying because of everything that we show you in my work and that I've known about for literally over a decade now, but that's been occurring for decades, that Elon Musk is literally just plagiarizing me, but plagiarizing those that I showcase that did all of the same type of gutting regulation back in the Clinton administration that corresponded to, let's call it Reagan's domino, to basically end the New Deal, to ultimately create this sort of economic boon that was led by the free animal spirits of the 80s that were all masked behind predation, of which Donald Trump came out of. There was Michael Milken, there was the junk bonds, there was the savings and loan crisis. And yes, Donald Trump was in the middle of all of that as a developer in Manhattan and being in the casino business in Atlantic City. And there's probably 4 or 5 crystal clear cases that Donald Trump should have been thrown in prison long ago. But of course, weak prosecutors and district attorneys and so forth in the system were part of the chicken shit club because they didn't want to bring cases against a billionaire because they didn't want to go through the system where they were embarrassed and humiliated because the top flight, free market attorneys could actually turn the tables and, get a victory. But what this system has done after decades and decades of erosion, evaporation of the law and the integrity of the United States based on fundamentals, what it was designed to do, because we had professionals in the system, of which, for example, in the judiciary, they get lifelong assignments. That's not the way I want to describe it. You know what I mean, though. That, if you're a Supreme Court justice, your term never ends. And so that's ushered in this insanity that nobody of my generation, I think, could have ever thought plausible, that billionaires could work the back door, like we've seen thanks to the great work of the guy I just happened to mention who wrote the Chicken Shit Club over at ProPublica, that revealed to us the corruption vis-a-vis Harlan Crow, a neo-Nazi, whatever the hell he is, that was basically giving direct payments to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Not to mention this guy, I don't know why I have a name. I get stuck on his name recently. It's going to come to me. I know who he is. The guy who was Leonard Leo, the hedge fund guy who was part of Opus Dei. He was another extremist in the religious sort of component of this. Was doing the same thing with Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, who, of course, during the insurrection, hung and perverted the upside down American flag in distress that emanated from literally abolitionists protesting slavery before the Civil War, and also American naval, the Navy, putting up an upside down American flag to basically send the message to other ships, at times of battle that they were sinking, for example, that they perverted into this insurrection, right? And so you had a Supreme Court justice that we didn't discover until 4 years later. His wife's presumably hung up the upside down flag at their house, sending a message to everybody that was paying attention that the Supreme Court is on your side. And then, of course, we saw the Supreme Court decide to etch a sketch 14th Amendment, Section 3, that was written after the Civil War, that if you're part of the insurrection, that you can't run for the office of the United States, let alone the dictatorship, or I should say the presidency of the United States. Do you see the circuitous pattern here? Do you see what's going on? Lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. History in a nutshell. Perversion, predation, all of these different elements. And the truth has no value because, again, we gave you the $71 trillion truth that the $90 billion a year apparatus of our government failed to deliver for the American people, which forced me to go on this incredible odyssey to be able to bring you the truth. And that's why I'm the producer, honestly, because I figure shit out and I make shit happen. But why is my name on the marquee of the Clean New Deal? Why does Patrick Lovell present the Clean New Deal? Well, because nobody else can or will. And what am I giving you that nobody else can or will? Well, the revelation of A, the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history that never ended, and how it all works, the who did what, when, and how, the discovery and the indictments that should have led to convictions that didn't because of the corruption that I'm revealing to you. So, what is the Clean New Deal? Well, again, to remind you of what I said previous, and I've said a lot in this, that Biden says when he's leaving, his presidency to the incoming Trump administration, after shaking hands with him like Neville Chamberlain in the Oval Office, Biden says in his, that Lawrence O'Donnell and everybody on MSNBC were declaring, oh my God, this is going to go down in history similar to what happened with Eisenhower's speech about the military industrial complex when Biden said, we've got to defeat the oligarchy. Biden has been a part of building the oligarchy for the last 50 years. And then he, as he's going out, tells you the truth, but in semantics and basically in doublespeak. And he basically sends the message, it's up to us, the people, to be able to turn the tables on the oligarch, because that's what we did before. That's what we did from the era of trust busting that was part of the progressive movements that would lead to all of the progressive, well, I said in progressive movements, but it was basically a revolution that would lead to trust busting. And then ultimately, after the Great Depression, the New Deal. And that was what inspired me to create the Clean New Deal. And what is the Clean New Deal? Well, it takes everything that I've told you so far and it puts it in a very easy to read chronological order of all that we think we are, that we're supposed to be, but we're not, based on everything that I'm telling you. That leads you to ultimately what the solution is. Get it? Problem, solution. So what are we going to do? Are you going to listen to Bernie Sanders, and are you going to listen to Elizabeth Warren? Are you going to listen to Rachel Maddow? Are you going to listen to everybody who's been doing what they've done the whole time to get us to this point? They never ended this because they play by the corruption's rules. I'm not saying they're corrupt. I'm not saying they're as bad as the maggots. They're not, or the Republicans, or however you want to disseminate that. But yes, they're not a far cry. I look at it as the new robber barons versus the new Confederates, quite frankly, and the techno bros being the new Confederates. Okay. But media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Rachel Maddow on down, what drives them are all what happens based on what I'm revealing to you. And when the biggest thing that happened in our lifetimes is what I'm revealing to you that nobody else did. And that's why I had to do what I did through the con. Again, thecon.tv. But that leads you to Federal Reserve Act 13.3. We've given tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the billionaire apparatus, which we can look at as the billionaires, but Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon, among others, they're not operating in a vacuum. There's apparatuses that surround the methodology that include the hedge funds and private equity funds and too big to fail banks and sovereign wealth funds and all of these other things that they've been able to prop up as a result of socialism for criminals. We've given tens of trillions of dollars to these bastards that have raped and roofied everything that the United States is supposed to be. And that millions of you are now seeing for the first time, even though we've been dealing with it for the last decade and more, and millions of you have already gone through this. But millions of you mostly aren't professional that went through this. You're people that were flipping houses, that got houses that you didn't understand what you were getting into because you were rats given a piece of poison cheese and you didn't understand the setup and the rug pull. You understood when it happened to you and you lost your houses, and then you started to piece things together like, well, wait a second, they can't foreclose on me because they don't have standing. Yeah, you figured that out. But there's much more. And the much more part is what I'm telling the rest of you. We gave tens of trillions of dollars illegally to what ultimately are the top 0.001%, which constitute this billionaire class, but it definitely benefited the top 10%. Anybody who has assets. We floated an asset bubble, the biggest asset bubble in the history of the world. And now we're looking down the gun of another asset bubble that's not even an asset, crypto. And I could go off on that for a long time. But we gave tens of trillions of dollars to the criminals that are skull fucking the world. And the law had no remedy because of what I'm revealing to you. So Donald Trump is one guy. Donald Trump is a mid-level player that did everything in the 91 indictments that the United States could not convict this ass clown. Whether it was in Fonnie Willis's case, the RICO case down in Fulton County, Georgia, Letitia James got the victory, but now it's going to be flipped, obviously, because they couldn't take him down and because of all the stuff that's going on with Trump. But everything that, I mean, excuse me, Elon, but everything that happened in that case is a reflection of what I show you in the con. But Letitia James, the AG of the state of New York, could not bring herself to understand the next level, which is what I'm revealing to you. It wasn't that Trump defrauded the banks. It was the banks were involved with the fraud because of securities and derivatives, among other things. It's called control fraud. It has been going on since the 80s, even though it's been going on longer but technology has a way of making things more and more diabolical, quite frankly, that can go faster. Okay. But if you want to understand the history of this stuff, Michael Milken and Donald Trump in the SNL era and Charles Keating, that all gave us ultimately Alan Greenspan, who became the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He used to speak in tongues because he was hiding all this shit that led to the great financial crisis, which was the largest financial calamity in the history of the world, that we then gave tens of trillions of dollars to the engineers of this disaster that are marionetting our government because they're above the law and market forces and they can get away with it. So people are like, well, my God, what's going on with Doge? How come we can't stop this guy? Let alone the fact that elections have consequences and we have, a majority in Congress that are Republican. So the Democrats can't do anything and we got to leave it up to the law. And maybe not all federal judges are corrupt. Some are. A lot of judges were corrupt. And basically what I'm revealing to you, that led everything that the government has been prosecuting Donald Trump for and revealing everything I'm saying to you, that they couldn't convict one guy, that I'm giving you that manifest literally tens of thousands of people in the financial system that were involved with tens of millions of felonies that led to millions of felonies in the courts that judges enabled. So why are anybody surprised that we're now a fascist state? Because corruption burrs and fuels fascism, which is another thing that I've been telling you about the whole time. So look, I've gone on longer than I wanted to because I just wanted to try to make this short and simple. But of course, every time I go into this type of thing, my mind just goes off on a stream of consciousness. I'm just trying to get to this point, right? We've got the answers. If I can get tens of millions of you to get educated about what the truth is, and then what we have to do to turn the tables based on what we did before and what Biden said we need to do, even though he was part of the problem, and what I'm doing and what I've been doing the whole time, that I need to get electrify or nuclearize tens of millions of you to become a nuclear reaction vector to the big bang of truth that I'm delivering. And this isn't a philosophical, ideological construct. This is based on discovery, based on the work and the criteria of understanding the law and understanding what the fact patterns were to be able to prove the case that should have led to the convictions. It's all RICO, racketeering. But our government doesn't have the ability to thwart corruption because it's corrupt. Get it? And so what do we do on the Clean New Deal? Well, I ask 4 qualifying questions that I think we can all understand that makes you kind of hesitate and go, wow, why didn't I put that together myself? Because I know this every day of my life. I know that the system is rigged. I know it's corrupt, but I don't know how they do it. And I've got react to everything based on everything else that I'm involved with in my life and my job and my family. And I don't have the bandwidth. So I'm going to stick my head in the sand and now I'm going to get ass fucked by the system even more than I have been before. Good luck with that. That's why the founders left it up to us, the American people, the citizen, to be the bulwark of the last stopgap in the protection of democracy, of by and for the people. Because as I've demonstrated this entire time, we're not of by and for the people. We're of by and for the corruption. The emperor's new clothes on really bad acid. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. Can you see the forest for the trees? So the 4 qualifying questions that we should all be able to wrap our head around. So I'm going to just say this to my African-American friends. What is qualified immunity? How many of you were outraged during Black Lives Matter, right? Why is it possible that police can shoot unarmed men in the back and not have to actually defend themselves in a court or even justify why they did it. There's a whole lot of reasons for that, mostly insurance. They try to get, you know, sort of settlements and make the families go away and whatever, but it doesn't go to a court of law. Just like most freaking, I don't know, arrests don't go to a trial. The system doesn't want people to go to trial. That's cost. It's costly and it takes time. Justice takes time. Okay, just like the truth takes time. What did Churchill say? That a lie gets around the world 6 times before the truth gets its pants on. So what is qualified immunity? It's that police officers can shoot to kill and not have to justify it. They can just do it. That puts them above the law. So then is the law supreme? No. And I'm not one to say that cops shouldn't be able to shoot to kill in the right circumstances. I'll bring it from my perspective. Did we see cops shoot to kill? I mean, they barely did, but in mass during the insurrection? No. Did we see the National Guard come in and, you know, do the smoke bombs and everything else that's involved with how they thwart, you know, massive protests? No. Did special ops come in from all of the places that they're located with incredible firepower all over the DC metro area? They were all within a stone's throw. They could have just rolled in a matter of literally probably minutes to throw the insurrection, and they didn't. Did they just mow down thousands of MAGA protesters? No. Would MAGA respond, you know, let's say docilely to that? Of course not. But what does it say about the construct of what I'm saying? It's just bullshit. It's just a version of white supremacy. Okay. What I'm saying is, yeah, the cops should be able to shoot terrorists and shoot of all stripes, but not people running away that don't have guns on them, that don't have drugs on them, just because they're a specific skin color for one instance. Okay. So what is qualified immunity? By the same token, what is judicial immunity? What is presidential immunity? Did the founding fathers have a revolution where they all gambled with their lives and really many paid with their lives? Not to mention the pain and the suffering of everything they had to go through with moccasins and Valley Forge. And I mean, just think about, you know, what it took to be able to defeat King George III and the power of the Royal Navy and the Redcoats and the power of the East India Trading Company and the power of Parliament. It took incredible insight and fortitude and courage is what it took, for better or for worse. And the 3/5 statute, yeah, I recognize that all the time. We didn't fight that revolution. They did. And they gave us the Bill of Rights and they gave us separation of powers. Come on, people. And it took 100 years to get to what? Practically the Civil War, where there was more sacrifice that we didn't do, that many, many millions suffered from, to break the chains of bondage, to live up to, well, you know, I don't want to get to that point yet, because obviously it led to Jim Crow, which then manifested the civil rights. But then in between, we had the war against fascism. Every time our country has stepped up for what it is, the will of our purpose, we win. And we're in that position again. So what is presidential immunity? Presidential immunity is to knight a king from Supreme Court justices that are corrupt. Should we have ethics for the Supreme Court justice or the law? All right. Now, is there anything in this so far that you disagree with? Because if it is, then get lost. But if you find yourself following the bouncing ball and you're like, yeah, no, I completely agree with that, then the fourth question you have to ask yourself is, what is the Electoral College? Well, it's a perversion of power. It's ruled by the minority. The Republicans like to frequently say we have a representative democracy. We're a constitutional republic, I should say. Representative republic, constitutional republic, which means ruled by the minority. So if the power is all the billionaires and the educated class and everything else, and that, you know, back in the old days, you know, women and, you know, I guess slaves didn't have the right to vote, then who's the system going to, you know, configure the power to? Those that got the power. And so we had these progressive movements our entire existence until we had victory after victory after victory because of sacrifice, and power doesn't relinquish anything without demand and all of those types of things. And we got through the New Deal, and we got through, the trust busting and the New Deal. But still, we have the Electoral College. to this day, which means that we have a majority, like, for example, we have a small population in the state of Wyoming that has an exuberant amount of billionaires that may have just as much legislative influence, quite frankly, than the state of California with 50 million people, which is a perversion of democracy. Yeah, they don't want majority rule, they want minority rule because that can give you the Confederacy or perversion of democracy, freedom, and justice. And so it's a deception. It's a diabolical deception and betrayal because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Hello. And so from those four questions, that's the Rubik's Cube. You've got to put it all together. And so we created the precepts of the Clean New Deal. The precepts of the Clean New Deal are A, we got to create a new Glass-Steagall. What is that? Based on everything I show you in the con. We learned this lesson after the Great Depression. We have to separate commercial banking from financial banking, from commercial banking from investment banking, because we need finance. You need banking, right? But you don't need gambling houses to gamble with other people's money. And this is the caveat to what they did with the Glass-Steagall Act back in, the era of 1933, when we were coming out of the Great Depression. We've got to make sure, and this is the whole point of Federal Reserve Act 13.3, that the full faith and credit, even though it says it in the statutes, and that's another thing that I revealed to you, the full faith and credit of the United States cannot be used to guarantee fraud, which is illegal theft by deception, which is racketeering in this instance. It's the mob. Nowhere, anywhere would anybody ever think that it was okay to write that into the statutes. That's why they don't write it into the statutes. But that's what we did through Federal Reserve Act 13.3 to provide tens of trillions of dollars to this billionaire oligarchy class that are skull fucking the United States because they're above the law and market forces. So we've got to change that. And the flip side of that is we've got to reverse Citizens United. You cannot have dark money. Ask all the victims of what happened at the P. Diddy freak-offs. Does anything happen and get in the shadows when you get roofied and gang raped? No. That's why we have to, in the Clean New Deal, the first two principles, or I should say precepts, are to prevent both of those insane criminal behavior. And then we got to demonstrate what is fact. What I revealed to you is that $71 trillion was given into this billionaire apparatus illegally that's given us everything that we're in the midst of, starting with Elon Musk. He didn't make his money by growing the pie for Tesla based on the fundamentals. It was a whole garden variety of meme stock, pump and dump and insider and trading and all sorts of manner, shape, or form of things that have gone into, making Elon the world's richest guy, among which was Elon spent $277 million on the presidency, and then he made over $181 billion since Trump won the election. And I think he's lost another 50 billion cents or something. Yeah, what a yo-yo. And I don't think any of that matters to Elon. I don't think anything matters above $1 billion. When you have $1 billion, you and like 10 generations of your family can live without any issues for the next 10 generations, for the most part, unless, of course, we have no humanity left, which I think is coming sooner than later if we don't get a fix on this. Because are there $71 trillion? Are there better ways to spend $71 trillion than on this corruption? Yeah, there is. It's the end of the world. People, don't ask, where are we going to get the money? That's not the question. The question is, are you going to continue to let the billionaire criminal class get trillions of dollars for free while they present things like Doge to where the most vulnerable and veterans and scientists and everybody else that are doing good work in our society are collapsed? It's not a rhetorical question. What are you doing? You're sitting on your ass. You're doing nothing. You don't know what the big picture is until you understand what it is with the Big Bang of truth that I'm giving you. And then ultimately, the next four precepts are to reconfigure what I just laid out in the four questions. Nobody's above the law. They can't be above the law. But right now, at this situation, I don't think we're going to see a free and fair election again. Like I said earlier, also, Trump stole the election. But it wasn't Trump. It was all the people in the Trump cadre. It was Elon, who was Spectre, and however that played out. But it was all the same old stuff that's existed from the Jim Crow laws that suppressed minority votes to the audited number of 3.5 million. That was more than the difference of the election, quite frankly. And can you imagine Kamala has done nothing about this? And same with Biden. They're just silent because James Carville's like, yeah, let the Republicans do whatever they want while they destroy everybody. And then we'll come and pick up the pieces. And everybody's going to be like, oh, yeah, give us Obama again. But Obama is what allowed all this stuff to happen in the first place. Neither one of them are a choice. We have to reconfigure the entire paradigm based on the truth that I am revealing to you. So nobody is above the law. No company is above the law. And then a couple of pieces that I want to add that Biden said that I thought were interesting, that not are just interesting, but necessary. Yeah, we have to have term limits. You can't have McConnell in there forever. Many terms he's had where he stood comatose in front of the Senate, where he was basically literally a zombie, like zombified, and still have as much power and prestige as he has. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. It's like, Charlton Heston, when they used to talk about not from my cold, dead hands will we change the Second Amendment. That was their whole, situation. And what gets our attention every once in a while when we have school shootings, right? Which are fucking terrorism in their own right. Yeah, and somebody who has an AR-15 and they can get it in the hands of a kid and they have assault weapons isn't going to take on the United States military, by the way. Okay? And Donald Trump with Doge and everything that we've seen since, what do they get? They got the FBI. They purged the FBI. They purged the DOJ. They purged the inspector generals. They purged anything in government that could hold corruption to account because the law is dead. Everything that I'm telling you configured in this whole situation, right? So you've got the first two precepts, the revelation of the $71 trillion truth and what we could do with that information, the four precepts that deal with the inversion, perversion of power that take us from qualified immunity and judicial immunity and presidential immunity and the electoral college through the final two pieces of the precepts, which is you can't have, you can't have insider trading at Congress. And of course, you have to have term limits. But then the final piece of this, and I'm going to emphasize this because it's going to take me on my conclusion here. We've got to get 13 Supreme Court justices in there to balance out the corruption of what we've had from the Warren Court forward. That obviously McConnell and his cadre have been involved with, going back to, quite frankly, Clarence Thomas, where the Supreme Court could basically etch a sketch the entire 248 years of American history by being involved with corruption. It's so disgusting. I can't even believe it. I can't believe that millions of you sat on your ass like frogs in a comfortable, water that was warm and then it got turned on boiling because of this. And now you're like, oh my God, corruption is here. What are we going to do? Oh, the Supreme Court's going to save us. No, they're not. They made Trump a king 8 months ago. And again, like I said, Biden had the power to, wage war on this stuff. But so let's say we stack the deck with 13 justices, but we've got to also have accountability for the Supreme Court justices. Unlike, Senator Whitehouse, who I actually think is the best senator that we have, even more so than Bernie Sanders. But, he's talking about ethics. No, obviously, ethics is not strong enough to curtail corruption. Only the law is. But the law can only be actually enforced if you have people in power that have credibility, honor, character, and integrity. You don't want to build a plane that's designed to fly. It doesn't fly without integrity. You don't want a pilot of that plane unless he knows how to fly it. Otherwise, it's going to crash. People, do I really need to explain this to you? Yes, I do. Because you can't hear. And I know only 1% of you are going to listen to this whole thing and it's outright. And this is the most important part based on 13. Okay. And here's my conclusion. And I swear to God, I hate going this long. I do. I don't like to go this long, but it's just like all of this information is incredibly important for you to wrap your head around, people. And again, that's why this is like the 256th truth bomb they've done for, I've said this stuff every freaking day pretty much for the last 2.5 years, even though I know there's 365 days in a year. Okay, so 13. So get a load of this. I'm going to tell you a personal story. Okay, So back in about 1994, I'll never forget. I'm living in Studio City, California. I'm pursuing a career in Hollywood, and I get a chance to work for one of the biggest producers in Hollywood. I'll forget his name at the moment. You may as well just say Weinstein, but it wasn't Weinstein. Somebody very similar to Weinstein. And I used to find myself getting up for some reason at like 5:13 a.m. Got to get up pretty early because we had to make phone calls to the East Coast, just part of the process. And 13 starts popping up on my radar. I'm like watching basketball games and it's like 13 seconds left when somebody hits a buzzer beater, or just 13 was everywhere in my life. I remember going to the Hollywood racetrack and it was the last race. And my friend points out, was my roommate at the time, and he knew I was like trying to figure out this whole 13 thing. And he's like, "Hey, bro," he's like, "check this out. There's a 13 horse at 13 to 1 odds. Maybe that's the story." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." So I decided to put $130 down, right? Some deviation of 13, at least in the number, right? So I lose, but I didn't see the right angle. He said that if you would have bet the nine, it it was so amazing, man. It was like the 9, 2, and 1 horse finished in the trifecta. And had I bet that, I would have won $1,300. Okay, based on the same bet. Something really stupid like that. Okay, complete coincidence, has nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you. But that's how like in sync my mind was with the 13 at the time. So I start exploring the number 13. And as I start exploring the number 13, and this is kind of the early time period of Google, and I'm reading all of these elements, and it starts to infuse things that I have interest in. Okay. So first and foremost, I've always probably put above all in religious sort of biblical stories is the story of Moses. That was the one that always spoke to me. Exodus, right? The liberation of the masses against tyranny. That was always the thing for me, in pursuit of liberty and justice. That's how I viewed myself as an American, and religiously. I was brought up Jewish, and I am Jewish, and there's a lot I could talk about that. But the nature of Moses to me was always, I was transfixed in terms of my understanding of Judaism was premised on the notion of Exodus that would end up leading to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, which is the law. That's the law. Okay. I mean, minus the construct of, okay, you pay obedience to the supreme power, the mythical God or whatever you want to say, or the singularity, blah, blah, blah. But I started, exploring that, well, 13, the power of 13 was all of these different things. The power of 13 was, first, it was balance in the universe because of the lunar cycle. It's actually 13 months because of the leap year. Okay. Then there was the nature of the 13 principles of God as professed by the greatest Jewish philosopher in history, Maimonides. And I found that was interesting because it had a celestial sort of corollary, right? So the principles of God are balance and harmony with the universe, quite literally. And so as I explored further, the meaning of the number to a lot of different sort of interpretations of it is revolution. 13 means revolution. Now, take what I constructed here, and there's a lot of mythology, and this is kind of silly stuff, but I love the notion of it. Okay. And maybe it's true, maybe it's not, I don't know. But this was the corollary that was in my mind from probably, I'm going to say 1999 to 2012, because my first film I titled, because of all of this stuff and some more that I'm about to tell you, Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream. Because there were 13 colonies that basically prescribed in the revolution this methodology of the law being central to where society put the law above the king, right? That was the whole purpose of the revolution. Now, in the whole chronology, you got to understand that, of course, we all think about 13 in mass as bad luck, right? And where do we get that from? Well, because in Friday the 13th, 1307, the power of the Pope and the power of the French king, and you got to think of this as like, season 4 of Game of Thrones, by the way, when, what was that character's name? The High Sparrow. And then, of course, Joffrey Baratheon's younger brother who became king in that whole episodic, when Cersei Lannister had to do the walk of shame. That whole thing was this, kind of representation of the Holy Roman Empire, right? The idea that the Pope and the King came together historically, that's the whole, and they decided to purge what they thought was a threat to their power because the returning Crusaders apparently had learned some sort of sacred knowledge in Jerusalem at the well, I mean, it was King Solomon's temple, right? And apparently, by myth, that's where the Ark of the Covenant was hidden. And then, of course, there's mythology that the Crusaders had found it. They discovered this mythical knowledge of finance, and they ended up taking this knowledge back to Western Europe. They became a threat. This is all kind of Da Vinci Code stuff and Dan Brown and yada, yada, yada. But they became a threat to the crown. And in reality, they became the working class and the guilds and the architects. And they had the Scottish Rite, 33-degree Scottish Rite. And this was all the undercurrent of what would become the Templars. Okay. And the Templars would then evolve into what were the American version of the Templars? I'll come to that in a second. But the idea is this kind of sacred liberty of knowledge against tyranny had manifested itself into the colonies. Now, again, remind you, I'm not giving you factual information here. I'm giving you myth. There's a lot of this based on fact, but here's the chronology of this whole thing. So the real story of 13 as it manifests into 13 colonies, and if you look at our dollar bill, you see that there's this mythology all over the place, right? So we've got in the left talon of the eagle, I think that there's 13 arrows, the quiver that represent war for liberty and justice for all. And the right talon, I think, it represents peace, but are they? The idea is that look, we can be peaceful or we can be, violent, and we can, in purpose of war. The idea is to create, a society that works for the people versus for tyranny. Okay, and then of course there's 13 steps on the pyramid that lead to the all-seeing eye, the eye of providence, which brings it back to the idea of like, okay, there's this universal truth, this universal construct, to where if you think about the Zen of the Force, to mix movie metaphors, was that, obviously it's the dark side of the Force versus the light side of the Force, and the Jedi versus obviously the Imperial force of fascism, right? Darth Vader and all that. So I found that all fascinating, right? So that's why I ended up naming my film Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, which turned out to be prologue to the con, which reveals everything that I'm telling you, which is ironically the story of history, right? This is mankind. This is what happens. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. That's what we learned in 17th century France that led to the Reign of Terror and their revolution, right? And all the insanity that came from that would then, of course, go the opposite direction, Napoleon, blah, blah, blah. People, 13 is a magical number. Okay, whether it's true that it has some sort of corollary to the principles of God within the universal construct and the notion of revolution. Yeah, 13 means mythically all of that stuff with these corollaries to the American experience that would give us the separation of power and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and this methodology where the law is supreme, not the king, based on literally 5,000 years of history, if you think about it, right? It's the whole freaking story of the world, man. So here I am after however long I've been talking to you for, and I know that nobody's going to get this far. I know it. Do me a favor. I'm going to post this, and if you do get to the bottom of this and you heard the whole thing, will you please just leave a message that says, yeah, I got to the whole end, and I either agree with you or I think you're fucking crazy. I don't care, either one. But the bottom line is that people, everything I'm telling you is truth about the con, okay? And the billionaire hijacking of this situation. And by the way, yeah, it is all crazy. But further to all of this stuff, Elon Musk spent $277 million. Okay. Now, all the powers that be, think about it. The Democrats raised $1.5 billion. you know what? The Republicans kicked their ass. I don't know how much the Republicans were able to raise, but the Democrats raised 1.5 billion, I think. And what did they spend their money on? Like they spent their money on celebrities to endorse Kamala, like that was going to move the needle. And what was Kamala's message? Her message was, etch a sketch the past, that we're going to turn the page, that we're going to be hope and change we can believe in part two, which are all just platitudes because they don't want you to wrap your head around all of this information that I'm giving you. And unfortunately, yes, I acknowledge that Kamala Harris is a technocrat, a professional, much, much better. And I really liked her husband, to be honest with you. But they're part of the system and they're part of the machine. And Kamala, as Attorney General of California, played a huge role in the con, and that's why she was able to be elevated to the point of running for the president, because the power in finance in Wall Street knew that she was one of theirs. And by the way, that's exactly who Pam Bondi is, if you want to know the truth, who is now our Attorney General of the Department of Justice, and she was involved with all of this stuff as well. But a lot of you, and I've put this out there before, and we put this out there in like 3-minute versions, and then, and we've created a merchandising page. But if you're not aware of this, the Supreme Court basically said that if you want to win an election, you've got to have skin in the game. And that's why these billionaire interests spend billions of dollars to steal trillions of dollars from the full faith and credit of the United States. Maybe I could have just said that at the beginning and that would have been all there is to it. And maybe that, but inevitably, always people push back and say, oh, this guy's like Khan. He's just trying to sell me sneakers. Do you really think that after listening to this entire thing? Would you think that after I showed you the story of the con that starts with Addie Polk, an African-American female woman that was the epitome of the American dream turned American nightmare, because she was, this African-American woman with her and her husband that got a piece of the American dream because they escaped the Jim Crow South to go to the industrial Midwest to work their asses off to get stability of their own home, which was saying something if you came from the antebellum South, which was something huge at the time. And she lived in her house for 4 decades and she owned her house outright, until the system turned the tables on her and literally stole her house using all the same methodology that Donald Trump used to steal the presidency, quite frankly. Do you think that I'm Donald Trump the con by telling you the truth? No, I'm telling you the truth. And what I'm trying to get you to understand, based on the entire corollary of what I'm saying, is that the Supreme Court told us that you've got to put money in the game to literally turn the tables or have a voice in our political structure. Okay. And again, what did Beyonce tell you? Okay. I can tell you what, it's just incredible to think about this out loud. And maybe this is just for myself. You remember when I said at the beginning, this is like part lecture, part sermon, part therapy? Yeah, this is my life. This is what I've gone through the whole time. And maybe long after I'm dead, somebody's going to find this to discover everything that I'm telling you is exactly what I'm telling you is truth. Absolute truth. Oprah Winfrey, a woman that millions of people think is a good person, but of course, who gave us Dr. Phil, and we all know Dr. Phil's a moron, but that she literally had the information. Remember when I told you before that Steve Bannon's paying attention to me, Elon Musk is paying attention to me, all the powers that be within our system are paying attention to me, including the most powerful of them all, BlackRock, and then Putin is paying attention to me, but you're not paying attention to me. You want to stay in your own silo. You want to stay with your head in the ground. You want to ridicule and kill the messenger when I'm trying to save you, because I believe in liberty and justice for all. Because I've gone down the path where we spent millions of dollars to get this $71 trillion truth that we're giving you for free because all the American people buy our lies, and that the entire structure of government failed to prevent. I mean, guys, I can't tell you. There's nothing bigger than what I'm telling you, which is why it's got to come from me, Patrick Lovell, because nobody else can or will. Because obviously, as you can tell, it's a long fucking story that you had to live and then go the distance to be able to get this information, to be able to say it with honesty. And nobody else is willing to put their career on the line and everything else because they don't speak in terms like this. I'm trying to connect with real people, the real people that are the victims of this stuff. And what I'm telling you is that you cannot sit there after everything I've told you, if you've made it this far, and think to yourself, I'm trying to grift you. Okay? If I were, I'd be trying to sell you crypto coin. where I raised $90 billion overnight because all these guys, from Saudi Arabia and everybody else can backdoor money to me because there's no value in crypto. Or I'd be telling you Bitcoin, like Melania coin, or golden sneakers, or whatever the fuck Trump was, in the midst of selling all this time, which is just such a grotesque de-evolution of the presidency. It's just so disgusting. As I say all the time, look, all we are, this entire process of what I'm revealing to you is the bloated dead whale carcass of the dead American dream that only parasites, pimps, whores, and junkies can thrive in, which of course is President Donald Trump's cabinet and Fox News and everybody on X that are fake bot accounts and everybody else. And so I'm asking you to consider, after everything I've done here, to contribute $13 to the Clean New Deal. Why? There's a lot of reasons, but the primary reason is that if maybe 7% of the amount of people that got destroyed by the 2008 Great Financial Crisis contributed $13, I put that number at 13 million, we'd have $169 million to be able to organize the response concurrent that would blow mainstream media's minds to turn the tables and everything upside down and right side up again, because we've all been sold a bag of goods and lied, cheated, and deceived and roofied and raped and all the rest of it. We'd have to create a new party or reform the Democratic Party, one or the other, because we're not going to have a free and fair election again. And everything that I put in the Clean New Deal at thecleannewdeal.org has everything that I presented here and more so, plus all of the evidence for those of you willing to go the distance to truly pull yourself out of this black hole of madness. And many of you have got your head up your backside black hole that you can't see the forest for the trees. And when you donate $13, what you're doing is you're exercising what the Supreme Court demanded that you do, that this is where your voice is, because it represents you. Now, I'm not big on donations. To be honest with you, I am a capitalist. I am an entrepreneur. Now, I'm not a capitalist in the way that many of you want to interpret the term capitalism, because what you're decrying is everything I'm revealing to you. You're trying to say that's capitalism. That's not capitalism. Capitalism is risk reward. When you invest and you do all the right things and you do it by the law, you deserve the upside. See need, fill a need, innovation. We need that in society. That is markets. And it's been that way for thousands of years. And it will be for another 1,000 or million or however long we survive if we get past this moment. But I'm also ideologically of the mindset that you've got to have a hybrid system, which we do. I mean, look at what Doge is doing right now. It's literally kicking veterans out of the veteran administration and onto the street and all of these other things. And, they were made promises based on, I don't know how many of them went and fought, I don't know how many tours in Iraq that went nowhere to basically prop up Saudi who attacked us on 9/11, which is another part of this. And you can say what you will, and we could debate that all day, every day, but that's what happened. Yeah, and I know all the truthers, and I know everybody. There's more to it than that. It's pretty simple. We knew exactly where the terrorist cells were, and we knew who were funding them, and we didn't stop them. Okay, that's how 9/11 went. In the next 20 years. So there's that. But we have a merchandise page. I'm not about nonprofits. Honestly, I've seen nonprofits in my life that are completely corrupt. They just basically are write-offs for rich people so that people in their cadre can act like they have cocktail parties and their shit doesn't stink when they're basically skimming from the top to pretend like they're doing good for people. They do some good, but a lot of times, a lot of these executives, they just skim off the top. I don't trust nonprofits. We had to become a nonprofit because of the way that we've structured this thing. But we've created also a merchandise page for product that's amazing, that emulates the Clean New Deal on our hats, on our shirts, on our tote bags, and all sorts of things that if millions of you wore, we would be able to turn the tables on MAGA. Were they effective at having millions of people in this red hat revolution for fascism? Yeah. Do you want to push back against that? Do you want to turn the tables? Do you want to defeat the madness? Yeah. There's no other solution. Bernie Sanders has been saying the same thing for the last, I don't know how long, 14 years. I don't know how long it is, because I put him at the end of my first film where he gave a speech that I was very compelled by. before I knew all of this information. And my first film, Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, that we distributed in 2012. So I must have got him in 2011 when he made this speech, right around the time of Occupy Wall Street, where he basically gave the same speech that he did the other night after Trump's, what is it? It wasn't a State of the Union. It was the speech to Congress, so to both chambers of Congress. So what, I can't remember the name of it now. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. So there's other ways we can fundraise and the mechanics that work well for you, but more importantly, we've made the con free. That took millions of dollars and thousands of hours to give you all of this information. That I have to also point out before I close that we spent so much money on E&O insurance and the attorneys to make it such that my executive producer wouldn't be sued into oblivion by the powers that be that control this country. So what they did was they just quashed us. We got quashed by BlackRock. And yeah, it had something to do with Oprah Winfrey, I think. And there's a reason for that. I was represented by the same agent that Oprah Winfrey's protege, a woman by the name of, doesn't matter at this point. It'll come back to me in a second, probably the second that I push pause. Anyway, she made 13th. That's funny. Ava DuVernay. She made 13th, the story of systemic corruption in the prison industrial complex. And yeah, that's another 13. But she was also a protege of Oprah, and she made this documentary about the Central Park Five, which of course involved Trump. So do you see all these corollaries? And by the way, I guess I may as well finish up with this. As it turns out, get a load of this in terms of the number 13 as well. After everything I've already told you, first of all, the universe is 13 billion years old. 13.8 billion is what we think in cosmology. 13, nevertheless, right? Based on all of the corollaries that I said in terms of the principles of the universe or the principles of God and that in the balance of universe and all of that kind of stuff. So as it turns out, Donald Trump has 13 billionaires on his cabinet. And Elon Musk's current government contracts are $13 billion. So yeah. Well, I'm glad I pulled that rabbit out of my ass after however long I've been recording. Jesus Christ, I hope somebody watches this. I hope you share this. I'm not even going to try to share this, honestly. I'm just going to leave this here. I might share it a little bit. We'll see. If you got through this thing, God bless you. And if you heard everything that I'm saying, God bless you. And if you go through, the con and the Clean New Deal, I'm available for any questions or anything that if you get gloriously motivated. But I'll finish with my final conclusion, because of really this is what it's all about, my friends, given everything that I've laid out. Look, man, this is the universal truth. Light forces its way through the darkness. You know your biblical teachings, right? Let there be light, right? It forces its way through the darkness, but with the energy of a supernova. That's physics. That's cosmology. That's the singularity. That's the universe, right? What I'm insisting to you is if you've got all of this information and this knowledge and this understanding, they can't piss on your head telling you it's rain. You can turn the tables. You can join me, and together we can defeat the misery of tyranny to unleash the renaissance of possibility, because there's better ways to spend $71 trillion than on the corruption that's destroying all of us and our world. We cannot let that happen. And when you live in light, you live in truth. When you lie, you're depraved. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. When you lie, inside you die. Stop lying. Stop buying lies. Become a nuclear vector reaction for the truth. And together, we can rise, roar, and revolt to rip the power back from the fascist, corrupt dictatorship that has bulldozed us all. And you're either going to have to pick up, arms downstream if that's the direction it goes, or maybe you pick up your credit card and you buy some merchandise, or you contribute $13 and join us and spread the word such that the truth overwhelms the depravity and the darkness of lies. Onwards and upwards.